We're getting into end of March, early April. It's actually March 21st when we're filming this right now. And a lot of people are starting to turn their attention towards getting out in the woods and enjoying the weather. This last weekend was just incredible. We had 60 degrees, sunny. I think it was 55 on Saturday. And it's drying out a little, so we can actually get the machines around the woods and out in the fields without scarring the land and getting stuck. And birds are chirping. I was on a client property last week, and I watched two toms out in the field around Stevens Point area just gobbling away, and heard a lot of clucking, and it was cool. I mean, it just sounds of spring, and you know, it's great this time of year. A lot of people are starting to turn their attention towards what can I do this year for deer habitat. I'm going to talk about some bad decisions I'd like to make sure that you try to avoid this year. People fall into the trap, and I would say most of us have fallen into the trap of one of these at least at any time during the last 10 years, last decade or more. You know, and we'll talk about this, you know, down here, handicapped by peer review, you know, science versus common sense. And a lot of this is based on common sense, and we'll talk about that towards the end. And a lot of this applies to wildlife in general, not just deer. You know, one of the things we do is go around, and whether it's Dylan and I or Kevin and now Joe, clients hire us because they've made major mistakes. It's set them back. They're not experiencing the level of success that they should be. And a lot of times, and I would say this is probably reflective of 95% of all properties out there, that you're only at 20% of your potential, 10% of your potential, 30%. Most people, less than 5%, are attaining 60, 70% of their actual potential of herd management, hunting management, and wildlife management on their land. There's so much more that can be done. And a lot of these programs, a lot of things we're going to talk about, actually limit people. They put a brake on their potential, meaning you're going to be at 30% because you did some of these things. You're never going to attain 40%, 50% or more of your potential. And so a lot of times that's why we're going out to property, and it gets frustrating because we want to see you have success, and you have to shake your head. And we manage by common sense, which is really critical to a lot of these things, just using your noggin that God gave you and relying on your experience in the field to make decisions. That's why we're pretty strict with even our habitat consultants like Joe and Kevin. You know, he's filmed over 800 videos with me, probably 900, close to 1,000, well over 1,000 by the end of this year. And he's been with me when we've selected dozens of tree stands and been in the woods with me, and this is what we do. So it's a little bit different with Dylan, but when it gets to Joe and Kevin and talking to them, one of the big things is we wanted to find people that would adhere to our WHS concepts, because those concepts are mine, and wrote my book in 2012 with my original concepts, and wanted to get those in print and also kind of put those out as a resume. This is what I believe, this is what I found, all based on common sense and experience, a high level of experience. So when it comes to Joe and Kevin, their contract states they have to follow these concepts, the WHS concepts. There's no room for interpretation. This is the way we do things for the habitat, and that's why we preach it, teach it, and talk about it in all these videos the WHS way. Number one, do you have oaks? This is a big one. You know, long ago, people thought if you have a bunch of oaks on your property, then you're going to have just bountiful wildlife and deer populations if you have oaks. Again, this is deer specific, but boy, it includes so much, so many different types of wildlife species. I talk about it often where you go to a stand of oak, central Wisconsin, south of 21, basically east of Necedah and west of Wautoma, in that area. And there's an area in there, back of the property, had a big stand of oaks. And so the management prescription from a state agency was to hack and squirt, get rid of all the aspen that was in there in low value timber, probably some ash scattered in there, maybe even some soft maple, and kill it in favor of the oak. So let's say we take this out of 80 acres, I'm just guessing it was 15, 18 acres, and it was right up against the property line to the east. So you're going in to the east. And so over the years, what happened was just a big stand of oaks. There's no cover, very limited browse. Oaks are not that great. They're not going to build a herd for you. They're not going to direct deer movement. They're not going to give you your hunting season or allow you to build a herd in any way. There's so many more factors that you need. They're just a complement to a good parcel that's already in place, good habitat, good diversity. Great to have some oaks. I have white oaks, red oaks on the property here, and I love having them. They're a great addition to what we have, but they're just a small part. They're 5% of the puzzle, 2%, 3%. So if you don't have them, you can have great deer habitat. If you do have them, you can have great deer habitat despite that you have too many. And that's what happens a lot of times. You have too many. It's shading out the understory. There's no cover. It's a limited food source. And guess what? Then when you have it on adjacent property or next to you, your adjacent property is where you place the deer that are coming into that oak stand or even coming into your property. So he took one of the best cover areas, most remote areas of his property, turned it into a park with an oak-like effect. Oak savanna even worse because it's traditional grassland, native grassland mixed with oaks scattered, and it really doesn't support a lot of wildlife in any way. And you take that and you displace. So we see a lot of management programs that really focus on oak. It's a higher dollar timber species, and that's part of the equation. You know, taking out an aspen. Aspen is fully a wildlife tree. You shouldn't ever kill it. That's terrible. There's no reason to kill it. There's no reason to girdle it. I've seen girdled aspen on property in favor of oaks. What a shame. 7,000 shoots per acre down the drain because they were girdled and killed. So really, if you have oak, cool. Don't brag about it. It's just a part of good habitat if it's already in place, but it doesn't make good habitat oak. So think about that when you're getting recommendations for oaks and oak management. Always manage your oaks responsibly, meaning that I look at some of those big canopy trees that are producing the most mass. They're also the most timber production trees. So a lot of times I see the best mass producing trees being cut down. On the property here, we don't want to cut those down. We have property to where we don't have to cut our timber to pay the bills or the taxes on here. And so I don't want to cut my best mass producers down, the big, straight, beautiful trees without a branch for 25 feet, 18, 22 inch, 24 inch diameter trees. I don't want to cut those out of the woods, even though they're the highest dollar trees. I want to leave those. So my oak management plan would be to get the leaners out, get the subordinates, get the multi-trunk, the ones that are diseased, the ones that are never going to amount to any mass producer, get those out. And then you have those scattered big trees. But we have also box elder, aspen, cherry, maple, lots of species of trees other than oak on here, not to mention shrubs and grasses and everything else. So that's diversity. The oaks are just to add on to the side. So make sure you're not focusing too much on oaks. That's traditional management. It can be very poor. Number two, government enrollment. I'm not saying the government programs are bad. I'm saying enrolling in them before you actually put your whitetail plan in place is a bad thing. A lot of people are handicapped. We'll talk about handicap a lot. There's a lot of these, again, programs or tactics or practices that keep you from attaining your potential, basically handicapping. You're going to be at 30% forever with some of these programs. Always make sure you put your clear cuts, your food plots in place, you get your plan in place, and then enroll it. You get a great tax savings. The state of Wisconsin can be just an incredible amount of tax savings. We don't have those same programs in Minnesota at that same level. But in Wisconsin, there are incredible tax savings when you enroll in those programs, but they can be very restrictive. The cool thing is most of the Wisconsin plan managers are very flexible for getting the job done correctly. There's some great people that are a part of that forestry group and those MFL plan managers in Wisconsin. And that could apply to just about any state too. There's some great people that are very flexible. So they understand the need to get things done in more of a habitat friendly way. But if you just go by the plan prescription and you follow that, whatever program it might be, then what you're gonna find is that these programs largely are dollar recommendations, not wildlife recommendations. I've seen that many, many times over. It all goes back to dollars. And if you're the state or government agency, it's obvious why they would actually recommend that. They're giving you cost share assistance. They're giving you a break on taxes so that you build good timber revenue on your property. They get that money back several times more in the future with tax revenue based on the timber sales. I hope that makes sense. You know, it's all going back to timber dollar. You're hiring because you want to improve your wildlife and you get trapped into this program when really the program is designed to give dollars back. And that's what they have to do. I mean, it makes sense. You know, they're giving you breaks monetarily and cost share assistance. They want that money back. It's a long-term investment they can afford to make. You can't afford to make that mistake on your property because you're limiting what can ever take place then on that 80 acres. I'm not saying the plans are bad. I'm saying make sure you get your plan in place before that takes place. And Dylan actually brought this up when we were talking about this video topic right here. And I believe you had a plan, and we talk about what is the place that we... Tigerton. Yeah, Tigerton Lumber. He had a client there where they were in between being able to enroll again. So it was just an awesome time to get done what they wanted to. Re-enroll it because it's a great program and a savings on taxes. And I think they were really happy with with what happened there. And Dylan has shared some B-roll of that in the past. But make sure what you're doing with those programs and that it's actually wildlife friendly, and then enroll it once you make the wildlife friendly improvements in the first place. Number 3, and this is similar, goes through, there's a lot of programs I've seen out there, CRP, where people have placed 20 acres or more into a stand of conifer. You plant these conifers, great wildlife cover, right? Wrong. It's not great wildlife cover at all. Right now, you go out in April, it can be very deceiving because a conifer stand in an otherwise big open hardwood region will have a lot of deer bed, pellet sign, maybe even some rubs from January, February, 3rd, 4th rut, where it looks very deceiving. There's a lot of deer in here, but then you go hunt there in the fall, there's no deer there because there's no food there. There's no actual cover down there. It's snow hindrance cover. It might be thermal protection for big winter severity and snowfall, but it's not actual quality cover or doesn't offer any kind of food or browse that deer require on a daily basis. And so think about this. I want you to just compare this. I'm not encouraging you to plant invasives. I'm encouraging, if you do manage your invasives, to do so staggered, pockets at a time. Replace it with something that's adequate enough so that you're not leaving the wildlife stranded and killing wildlife populations because you got rid of an entire field of autumn olive or whatever it might be. But I want you to think about this comparison. Think about, we don't want to plant invasives, have invasives, because it changes the habitat and changes the environmental aspect of everything from growing around it, to that entire habitat, that entire property. Is that any different than planting a monoculture 40-acre stand of white pine or red pine or white spruce just because it's a native species? The environmental impact of planting those acres in conifer that used to be an ag field or an otherwise diverse forest can last for decades to come. It can change the soil for decades to come. So that's okay. And it's okay because it's native, but more importantly, the state or government agency can get dollars back for allowing you to roll that and get a tax saving on those CRP practices in the first place. I was in another property in Wisconsin last week, Buffalo County, huge pine plantations up on top of the property. And I'm hoping there's a little bit of flexibility there so they can leave some for access, blow their scent into, get rid of others more in a clear cut, because there's basically stance at this point was to take out every 3rd tree. Well, they're just creating, again, a perpetual monoculture of conifer going on for decades, and it's hurting the wildlife potential on the property. Great for timber value, but the clients didn't have it planted on the property. They've purchased it since, and very, very, very poor for wildlife with lasting implications for decades and decades to come. Where we have honeysuckle on the property here, we have some buckthorn, and we see that common in southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, all over the place in the Midwest. But we still have oaks, we still have aspen, we still have box elder. These invasive shrubs are not taking over the forest, they're just part of the overall diversity that's in there, whether it's invasive or not. The bottom line is that we actually have diversity with some of those invasives mixed in our woods. We have a high level of diversity, lots of timber type species, different pockets of aspen versus more mature oak versus cherry, box elder edges, briars, sunlight openings. We have a lot of different diversity on the property, and it's bad to have those invasives, but someone will take a woods like this, cut it all down to the ground and plant 100 acres of conifer in there like they did on those properties in Buffalo County last week, and that's okay. Even though it's changing the landscape and the value of wildlife and whitetails and everything else for decades to come, I don't think it is okay. I don't think it's a responsible decision. So it's easy to get roped into some of these programs that encourage you to plant conifers or big blocks of conifers. They're not helping your wildlife, and in the end, it can be very detrimental. No different than if you're planting in any kind of native species in a monoculture across an entire landscape. I was told long ago in the early 90s, mid-90s, when we ordered our trees, we planted 9,000 trees in 2 years, that I could get cost share assistance if the trees are planted in 7x7, 8x8 spacing, because it all boiled back to timber harvest. I learned long ago in my 20s that the recommendations that were being made were based purely on boards per foot and future dollars back to the state in terms of revenue. Totally got that. And the guy that I worked with was really cool. His name was Jeff. I think he was out of Tuscola County. And Jeff said, you know, this is better for wildlife if you do it this way, but if you're going to get cost share, since you have to do it this way. So he recognized that long ago. He was a good resource professional, as a lot do. But with that, again, it all goes back to dollar recommendations. A lot of times you're getting duped into thinking something that is good for wildlife when really it just has to do with dollars and cents and revenue coming back. And it's traditional deer management. It's really bad. It can make very bad lasting decisions for decades to come. I'm not saying you don't try to control your invasives, or if that's a bad decision that you do so. But what I am saying is that be very wary, because some of the plants that are native and some that even are attached to certain various programs, government programs, can have lasting negative effects on your property for decades to come. So be very wise about those decisions. Number 4, overall trendy buzzwords. Hack and squirt, girdling, TSI, hinge cuts, fire. There's a lot of things you can hear and think, I got to do this. A lot of fire going around right now. Someone talked about it. I looked at recommendation on a property. They're talking about, let's, instead of hinge cutting in general, just get prescribed fire in there, and you explode the amount of herbaceous growth. This is on a Michigan property. And folks, herbaceous growth and that green growth going into hunting season is not there. So if your goal is to build a quality herd, a quality hunt, and actually offer forage for deer and wildlife and cover that they need during the lean months, which is fall and winter, not July, May, April, August, then you need hardwood regeneration, you need woody stem growth, you need briars, shrubs, early successional growth. That's what supplies that cover and food. Just by running fire through there and exploding herbaceous growth down on the ground floor for the summertime does nothing for you or the whitetail herd. Now, when you get down into areas like Arkansas, Kevin Smith was talking about going to a property down in Arkansas. I want to say it was a pretty large property, maybe 1,200 acres. I don't know if you remember that one, Dylan. He was talking to me about it, and they have a lot of prescribed fire going on. And that's fine down there. You know, Arkansas, what's different is we get frost and freeze sometime anywhere, you know, in our areas, northern third of the country, you get frost and freeze anywhere from middle of September, early September, all the way to third week of October. Well, when that happens, then all that herbaceous growth is gone. As far as the food source, cover, anything, it just shrivels up. We get down into Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri. There's a lot of areas down there that are further south where that herbaceous growth lasts all the way through the season, and it lasts in the form of good quality cover. So we're talking about two different areas here. So I'll see people make recommendations in Missouri for fire and say, well, we need to do that in Michigan. And that's not the case. Or someone in Michigan will hear that buzzword, fire, fire, fire. We got to do it up there. And a lot of times people are burning their switchgrass in open CRP fields. It looks really cool on social media, but that could have been accomplished with mowing. They didn't have to do that. And they already had a junk combination that laid down all winter long. And then they actually practice prescribed burn. And they get the same stuff, even thicker, afterwards. So it's not like it just brings out the best grass, like the switchgrass, it's not going to fall down. It still is a grass blend. You're burning it, you're getting more of the same, even thicker now, maybe even taller, but then it lays down, it's not doing anything. So really, is fire for you? Maybe, maybe not, but it's a buzzword. You know, a lot of these things, even girdling, most girdling projects are not appropriate. And people are going out and girdling their woods in Michigan. And they're girdling the wrong timber, a lot of times, like I talked about, in favor of oaks or hardwoods or dollar trees. That's why they're girdling the non-dollar or timber species trees in favor of the hardwood. And always remember this, is that the higher the dollar of timber value on your property, typically it's reflective, as in similar extreme, the value of your wildlife habitat, meaning that if it's high value timber, it's low value wildlife habitat. If it's a low value timber, then it's high value for whitetails and wildlife. That's a proportional mix that we've experienced for a long time. And speaking of experience, you know, a lot of this, or even hack and squirt, it's the same thing as girdling as far as you're killing trees, staying in timber. Most of the time it favors the wrong trees. Science versus common sense. See, I don't have to, before I write about something or come on in a video, I don't have to have a peer-reviewed article that's been worked on for years and gone through the scrutiny of peer review to offer an opinion based on experience, based on a very, very high level of experience across the board. That's where science and common sense, especially when it relates to smaller parcels, is very contrasting a lot of times, because the science, hacking and squirting, girdling, prescribed fire for large areas of public land or commercial forestry can be great practices as a whole on a large scale. But when you try to fit it to small parcels, there's a lot of disconnect. You know, I can offer opinions that aren't based on peer review. I'm basing it on common sense and a whole lot of experience, and that's what we try to bring to you guys out there. And that's where you have an advantage, because a lot of times people are handicapped by science. They're handicapped by peer review. They can only look at something that's peer reviewed. They can't look at experience. A lot of them don't have that level of experience anyways. It's all in the classroom. And so you really have to watch out for all of this, because a lot of this schooling versus common sense, government programs focusing on monocultures or oaks, hardwoods, dollar for timber, they're huge decisions for you as a landowner that can have decades-long lasting negative implications for everything you're trying to do and severely limit your potential. And you know, part of the potential is Dylan and I go out to properties, and Kevin and Joe, and we're looking at, you know, a lot of these properties, we're being hired to manage the habitat. People are already doing a good job planting food plots, and we prescribe what food plots they should be planting and why there's a priority at one time of the year versus another. The bottom line is the hunting is the lowest hole in the bucket. How you hunt, the strategy of the hunting, how many deer you're pushing off the land, that's the lowest hole in the bucket. That'll always, so when you add poor hunting practices, which would be on 90-95% of all small parcels as it relates to actually building a herd and reaching your potential, and when you add that together with bad decisions that can affect you for decades, people are handicapped before they even begin a lot of times. And that's why they hire us, that's why they have us come out, and that's why we get so excited about helping people, because it's pretty easy to help people when we're trying to reverse the bad effects that they see in person from a lot of these programs that we're talking about, let alone being able to talk to them and say, if you access through that bedding area that you just created, you're going to alert every deer on your 50 acres or 500 acres that you're there. If you sit in that location on that food plot, you're going to spook out the entire herd. A lot of times they know that, they just want someone to tell them that. But at the same time, we relate it to the entire rest of the property as a holistic approach. One of the bad ways, and we could have put this down, is you look at every square inch of your property. This should be a food plot because it's good soil, open space. This should be a bedding area because it has this condition of habitat, and you create it as such. This should be a pond because it's a riparian waterway. It's a low area that you can make a really cool wildlife pond, without looking at how that fits within the entire whole of a small parcel. And that's what I want you to focus on out there, so you're not making these bad decisions and handicapping yourself for decades to come, so that ultimately you, your family, your friends can enjoy great habitat, a great herd, and a great hunt this fall. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to '93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.